Hello, and my name is Doug Tepe. This is the Tinker and Create class on 3D modeling and animation. Tonight we're going to be covering a little bit more about textures and materials, as well as hopefully we're going to get around to talking about animation and actually starting to add a few little animated elements to our little animation here. So one thing I wanted to address when we first get started here is the question that came in towards the end of the class last week, which was what happens when when your objects end up seeming to be attached to each other. The reason for that happening is that when you create a new mesh and you add it while you're in the editing mode, it treats it as part of the first object that you were working on before. So let's just take a look to see how the stream health is going and whether or not I got any questions. And let's see here. Just trying to refresh it so I can see myself. There we go. Now I can see myself. So what I'm going to do this week too is it seems like I missed a few of the questions last week when they were coming in. So I'm going to try and keep an eye on the time here. And at the quarter of an hour and at the half hour and then at the last 3/4 of an hour, I'll just go back to double check to see if there's any questions or anything before I go on. So yes, let's go in and have a look at Blender here. Take this over so we can see my screen. Double checking that I can see my screen here. Okay. So we are in Blender. I'm going to go ahead and open up the class that we are working on here. Now, one thing actually I'm just going to mention here, we're going to see a little bit more of this as we go along, is that where I put the American flag last week, because this was right before the 4th of July, you're going to see it's bright purple now, or this is actually magenta, which is a combination of red and blue in terms of computer colors. So it's a bright magenta. This is what Blender does when it can't find the original file for this. So I downloaded that picture of the American flag last week, and I put it in here. And then in the meantime, I deleted it because I had put it onto my desktop. And I like to try and keep a tidy desktop, so I deleted it. And so now Blender is going off and saying, well, the file's missing. We can't put anything in here. And that's fine because the American flag was just for the 4th of July. We'll actually have something else here in the meantime. But that is why it is bright purple right now, because the American flag is missing. So that's okay. I'm just actually going to go off and delete this for now. We're going to replace it a little bit later with the actual room that our person's going to be walking across in. So we'll be seeing more of that purple color later. So first things first, I'm going to just do a quick demonstration on what to do when you end up having multiple objects all brought together. So we're going to start this demonstration by adding in Suzanne. So right now, my cursor is right here at the center of the world. That means that that's where I'm going to actually be placing the new object here. And I'm going to add in Suzanne the Monkey. Okay, so here's Suzanne the Monkey. She's very big. So first things first, before I start trying to merge her with another one, I'm going to rotate her around the Z-axis. Here we are. So R for rotate and Z to choose which axis I'm rotating her on. So I want her to be 180 degrees so she's facing the other direction. Or actually, no. I had forgotten. Everything was kind of backwards last week anyway. So actually, Suzanne is in the right place after all. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take Suzanne the monkey and I'm going to merge her together with my person here. So that way I can put Suzanne the monkey on top of my person. Okay, that's kind of silly, but it'll give you an idea of how this works. So I'm going to scale her down till she's a little bit smaller. Bring her up, and now I'm going to press Shift and click. So both Suzanne and the person are both selected at the same time. Okay. And to join the two of them, I'm going to press Control J. Okay, so this actually ended up doing it backwards. So I'm going to do Control Z again. And I'm going to turn on my screencast keys so you can see which buttons I'm pushing as I go along here. There we go. All right, so start with the person, then says that select Suzanne. All right, person, shift, select Suzanne. And now press Control J. All right, Suzanne, then the person, Control J. There we go. So I always get this backwards every time I do this. So Suzanne, shift, the person. And if you look over on the side here where we have our scene selection, the person is in gold, Suzanne is in red. So this means that the primary object that we've selected is the one that's in gold, which means the most recent object that was selected. That means that's the object that everything is going to be joined to. So for example, if I go through and I select these two chairs, you're going to see that one's in gold and one's in red. So by selecting Suzanne first, then the person second. The person is in gold, so when I press Control J to join the two of them together, now we see over here that Suzanne is now actually part of the person. You don't even see her listed in the scene selection. So now, because she's actually part of the same object, if I grab it, she goes around with him wherever she goes, wherever the person goes. They are now part of the same object. When I press Tab now, you'll see that the little wireframe appears around them both at this point. And likewise too, of course, I can select each one of these little pieces around each of them all at the same time. You'll notice, of course, because I'm editing the person now, which includes Suzanne at this point, I can't click on anything else in the rest of the scene. If I want to click on something else in the scene, such as my vase or my bowl, I have to press Tab to switch back into object mode, switch over to that object, and then press Tab again. And you'll see now I can't select Suzanne or the person anymore. Instead, I have this vase selected. So then now that I pay attention, this is tricky. Now that I have the vase selected and I add in a new cube, that cube is technically part of the vase. And you'll see that it has the exact same Voronoi texture as the vase has, because it's considered all part of the same material that is currently attached to that. I switch back to object mode and I move this around and I've got these two objects going around together. So this is the thing to be aware of. If you often see these objects appearing in multiple places, either you mistakenly join them together by pressing Control J as I did, or you added a new mesh while you were in editing mode. All right, so I'm going to undo this because I do not want that cube to be part of it. Let's go back to Suzanne the Monkey and the person here. I'm going to zoom in on the person with the numpad period key. So let's say I wanted to actually replace Suzanne the Monkey on top of the person's head here. So let's cut off the person's head. And we're going to do that by switching it into wireframe mode. We switch to wireframe mode by pressing Shift Z. This allows me to select everything on top here. And of course, you got to remember, when we have the box select mode, it's greedy. Anything that the box selects anything that the box touches will be selected. So if I want to select the head, I can't just go beyond the head into the neck because it's going to select the neck as well. I just want the head. So I select the head here, press delete, and tell it to delete the vertices. Okay, now when I press Shift Z and go back to the top here, you're going to see it's actually hollow on the inside. So let's select all around the neck here, just along the top rim. So we're going to want to make sure that we are in edge select mode. Let me make sure that my face is out of the way here. Okay, so we want to be in edge select mode, which is this button right up here in the upper left-hand side. And I should also mention too, of course, you can switch between the three vertex selection, edge selection, and face selection by just pressing the 1, 2, and 3 along the numbers on the top of your keyboard. Make sure it's not the numbers in the number pad, but the numbers along the top of your keyboard. So these are above the Q, W, and E keys. 1, 2, and 3. All right, so with the edge select mode, I'm just going to press Shift and select. Oops, I selected the wrong one. Here we are. Hey, that made it easier. I'm going to use the loop select by pressing Alt and select. Because the entire area around the neck here is all considered part of the same loop, it selects the whole thing at the same time. So that actually made it easier. Now that I've got this whole loop selected, I want to turn it into a new face. So I can turn it into a new face by pressing the F key, and now it's sealed on top. Okay, great. Now let's go back to Wireframe Mode and select all of Suzanne here. Now again, I need to make sure I'm in Wireframe Mode because now that Suzanne is actually part of the same object, if I just go off and I select her like this without switching into Wireframe Mode, you're going to see that she's actually not selected on the opposite side. So I want to actually select the entirety of Suzanne, every single vertex and edge of Suzanne. And the easiest way to do that is in Wireframe Mode. Okay, now with Suzanne in Wireframe Mode, I can press Shift Z to go back so I can actually see my shapes better. Grab her and bring her more towards the center here. By switching into front orthographic view, I can see quite precisely where I'm placing her. So that way she will be almost exactly right on top of the head here. Pressing the 3 on the number pad allows me to make sure that she's aligned forward and backwards pretty well. Switching back to 1 again. This looks pretty good. Great. So now that she is selected like that, now all we need to do is to bridge between the two faces, between the faces on the bottom of her head with the face that I have on the top of the neck there. So I'm going to G to grab her again and bring her up just a little bit so I can see underneath here. All right, so switching back to face select mode with the 3 key. Just going to pick these two faces on the bottom of Suzanne here and the face on top of the neck. Then I'm going to select Bridge Faces. You're going to see that they are now completely blended together as a part of the same object. Pretty awesome. Now the only downside is here, of course, is now I notice that her chin is going straight down into the chest. So we can actually adjust that back a little bit. Let's switch it into Edge Select Mode so it's not overlapping here, and just grab that top one and push it back and down a little bit. Suzanne has a very big chin here, so we're just going to push this back and down a little bit. Maybe give her a little bit of a belly. Now Suzanne the Monkey has the head on top of our person. So there you go. I've actually merged two objects together. They're actually part of the same object now. And I did that by merging the two together by pressing Control-J. And with Control-J, I was able to actually take two separate objects, bring them together into a single object, and then using the bridge function between faces, connect the two of them together. Makes it actually pretty easy. Now, of course, admittedly, I don't really want to have Suzanne as the face of my person. This was really just more for demonstration purposes, but she does look actually kind of funny like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reload what I had before. So by going up into the File menu, I can click on Revert here, which is going to revert back to my saved file. It's going to say, okay, are you sure? Here, let me get my face back on here again. Hi. All right, so it's going to say, are you sure you want to revert? And now we revert back to the save file. So this is kind of a handy situation. Let's say you're in the situation where you've been making a whole bunch of edits and then you just realize that you just did something completely wrong and you want to start over again. Okay, now we're back to my square head again. So of course, we can actually use that same technique that we used to attach Suzanne to it to get some more details on our person here. For example, there is the sculpting mode in here, where I can actually sculpt an actual object. Now, I'm not a very good sculptor, and this is not a class on sculpting, so we can't really spend too much time on that, but I'll just give you a quick little demonstration on that. But before I go into that, let me just double check to make sure that there aren't any questions here. No questions. Awesome. Okay, so to do sculpting, the first thing to keep in mind is that you need to make sure you have as many edges, faces, and vertices as possible. So to do that, let's say we want to add in a new mesh. This mesh will have a UV sphere. All right, I'm going to press the dot key on the keyboard. Oh, looks like my screencast keys was shut off again. Let's see here. There you go, the dot on my numpad. There you go. So I zoom right in on my sphere here. So the sphere actually automatically comes with a lot of edges, faces, and vertices. We switch this into editing mode, then we'll see that we can actually go in here and start using some of the editing tools. The first ones right up on top here are the draw functions, as well as clay functions and other things. But it's really just as simple as going through your object and slowly wiggling the mouse around until you see that you're pulling out more of that particular object. And by pressing the Shift key as you click through it, it's going to start pushing it further in. So for example, I could actually just click pushing this out and then pushing this in with the Shift key, and it can make it more like a face. And a nose. Like I said, I'm not very good at sculpting. And you're going to see that it will actually start roughly getting into the shape of a face. I mean, of a head and the like. So, so this is the same technique that you can use then to, say, for example, sculpt out a much more realistic looking face and then perhaps attach that onto your person as well. Of course, as always, if you need to have more detail, then you need to add more vertices, and we can do that by subdividing it. So remember, as we mentioned in the first, or I believe the second class, we subdivide by right-clicking the context menu, making sure, of course, by pressing the A key. Screencast keys keep on turning on for some reason. There we go. All right, so by pressing the A key to select everything, right-clicking and saying subdivide. And so with the more edges and faces that you have, the more that you can actually sculpt. But of course, the more it requires the computer to calculate it all too. So you definitely need to make sure that you have a computer that's actually able to handle all the extra details when you start adding in more and more subdivisions. Okay, so that is how we sculpt. And you could, if you wanted to, sculpt in your own cool object and add it to your person. But for now, I want to keep this class going. Let's see, we're at 6:18 here. So what I want to do next is to create our own custom texture. So last week, we talked about adding textures or adding different materials. So for example, on our person here, I created different materials that I associated with different faces that were on the object. So for example, I have a, well, let me double tap A here. I have a material called skin here. If I click select, then you can see it is on the front side here. Same thing with jeans. I can click select, and it'll select the blue underneath. And I set it to be the base color over here of blue the whole time. Makes it easy. And then we also discovered last week that as we go through, we can, instead of actually picking a particular color for our material, we can actually load in a separate image and use that image for our texture as well. In this case, I used weathered wood for the table. And we switched to that by clicking on the little dot next to the base color here, and it brings up a whole new menu that gives you a whole bunch of different textures that you can choose from. including, of course, an image texture. So I loaded in the image texture. Going on to the vase here now, when I clicked on the little dot next to the base color, I chose the Voronoi texture. So anyways, there's a lot of these different textures and the like that you can experiment with on your own. What we're going to try and do today, though, is we're going to use the built-in functions in Blender to actually paint our own texture. And actually, now that I have this American flag here, but it's missing because it's all in purple, this big plane here can actually be used as a picture. We'll use it to draw a picture here. So first things first is let's switch over to our texture paint mode. All right, so to get to texture paint mode, just look along the top here. Now keep in mind, each one of these menus up at the top here actually just bring up a different workspace. Workspaces are what actually describes what kind of tools are currently visible right now, such as right now that I'm in my layout workspace, it means I've got my scene collection over here, my details menu over here, and the viewport on this side. When I switch over to texture paint, it's going to have a painting section over here, a viewport here in the middle, and then the details over on this side. But we can even click and drag around these, and that's actually going to permanently change how this particular workspace will look at any particular time. And we can even add new workspaces by clicking on the plus up here as well. Or we can even rename our workspace at any time and say, hi, Doug. And now this is my Hi, Doug workspace. So if you ever are looking at your workspaces and I'm going off and I'm describing something and I say, well, you need to go to your texture paint workspace, then it's possible maybe you renamed it by accident by double clicking on it and typing in the different name up there. So do keep that in mind. A lot of things in Blender are completely customizable. So sometimes they might end up getting broken because maybe you clicked and dragged it around. If it ever gets completely broken and you just can't seem to find anything anymore, then there are options, I believe, in the defaults, perhaps, or in the edit menu, that allow you to completely reset the layout back to the way the layout was originally. And of course, now I can't actually find it because I haven't actually had to use it in a while. I'll have to look into that and tell you guys about it next week. Okay, back to texture paint. So right now we have this American flag here, and it tells us that we're actually editing the American flag. But of course, since it's missing, then I can't actually edit it right now. So instead, let's just click the X up here to remove it for the time being. So we've removed that from the time being from this viewport. It doesn't mean it's been removed over here. It just means it's been removed over here. Now we're going to click on Create New Image by clicking on the New button. The name will be Picture. Okay, Picture is good enough. The width and the height is 1024. That's good enough for now. And we'll click OK. Now it automatically fills in the whole space that we have here. So just roll the mouse back a little bit, just so we zoom out a little bit and you can see the whole picture now. So now this is a complete black picture, and it's called Picture. And that means, of course, that now we can actually see it in the picture list. So again, as we saw last week, right here, with this drop-down menu, you can see all the other pictures that we have available, including the new one that we just created. So of course, as you can already imagine, by going over here to our viewport on this side, we can now assign our flag to have the new picture texture applied to it. So of course, our flag texture now, or excuse me, our flag material now is going to be called Picture. So I double click on the material though to rename it Picture. That's the name of our material. And then down here where it says what the base color is, here we go. Okay, so to get the base color in here, now I actually brought this back in. Okay. So of course, you can actually see the little mistake I made here. I can actually grab this right here and hide all the buttons there for all the tools I have on the side, which I did. If you ever make that mistake, look for the little caret right up here, the little arrow, to get it to pop back out again. Okay, so now looking over here at my base color, it says the base color is American flag.jpg or American JPEG. I can switch that by dropping down this menu to switch it to picture. Famous last words doesn't actually seem to be working. Click X. Image texture. Picture. Now why is that not working? No, I don't need to open a new one. I just want to use an existing one. Aha. Okay. Oh, wait, it's still purple. I totally forgot because last week I went off and I told it to use the American flag as an emission one. So it was actually bright enough to glow all over everything. And that's why it's still purple. And that's why I'm so confused. All right, so we're removing that one. In fact, we're actually just removing the emission altogether. And we need to turn the brightness down to black so it is not emissive. It is black otherwise. Okay. Now going up here to my image texture in the base color and selecting picture. Now it should be the same as that one. Now let's go over back to this side, switch it into paint mode. And you'll see that you can actually now paint on the other side. I've got a funny little smiley face here. And of course you can actually paint over on this side too. So with texture paint, for example, let me switch over to the other side here. Famous last words, it doesn't actually seem to be painting. Fill. I don't think I actually have the object selected. No, I do have it selected. Object. Texture paint. There we go. Now I totally filled it in. So anyway, there's the paint bucket picture here. Works the same as a paint bucket picture over here, which just will take the color that you're currently working with and make it all white. All right, so let's see if we can take this picture and turn it into a lovely picture of some flowers. So you can either edit it on this side or you can edit it on this side. Since this side's actually already kind of square, we'll just start on this side. So I'm going to go up here to the draw button. You'll see that it already has a little circle here, and it says the radius is 50 pixels. I'm going to switch this up to a greenish color. And Control Z to remove that for now. There we go, greenish color to make leaves. So you'll see that it's actually applying it to the actual world at the same time as I'm drawing it over here on the side. And a stem going up here. My nice little picture of a flower. Okay, so we got green there. I'm going to switch back up here to a different color. It's going to be kind of a sunflower maybe, or a daisy. Big circle here. All right, and then let's see here. Then there's also the blending tools right up here. By default, it is on mix. What I'm going to use actually is the multiply function. Now, multiply usually means that it's going to take a color, except for totally white and totally black, and it's going to try and bring it down. It's going to try and bring it darker, to closer to the color that you're using. So let's say if I wanted kind of a brownish color, I'm going to turn the brightness down a bit, down to a dark brown. You're going to see that by using multiply, or did I get it confused with screen? Yeah, here we are. So by using multiply, it's going to just darken everything. You know what? I'm not really sure if multiply is the function I want. What about burn? Do they have burn on here? Yeah, here we are, color burn. That's what I want. Crank up the radius. Too big. Radius can get up to like 90 or so. There we go. That's the effect I was looking for. It looks like it's actually burning a hole right in the middle. Actually, I'm just going to turn this down to totally black. Too black. Okay. Just a shade above black, still on the orange side of things. I'll use multiply here. There you go. So kind of like a sunflower. Go back to color burn again and just get around the edges here. There we go. So nice little bit of color on the inside, a little color on the outside. And we're going to go back to multiply again. Too dark. So reduce the radius a shade. Actually, I'm going to use screen this time. So while multiply is often used for darkening things, screen can often be used for highlighting things. So I'm going to use screen here. Turn up brightness to almost white again. Too light. Let's turn the strength down a little bit. There we go. All right. Take the radius down to, say, 10 or so. That's what I like. And so then the nice thing about, nice thing about screen is that screen will not actually make it brighter than the white already is. So I can use it to color the outside of my flower here without going into the white. And then we can even use the Smudge Tool, which is the picture of a finger here. Make the radius a little bit higher again. And just kind of smudge in the edges. Pull them out a little bit. Too much. Control Z. Got to keep the Control Z handy here. Sometimes it's hard to actually pull this up. There we go. Use the smudge here. No. I'm going to use the smudge again, but I'm going to use a much larger radius to trim up the too large radius. Make it 100. There we go. Pull up my leaves a little bit. They look a little bit more sunflower leaves, which are kind of more narrow in the middle and wider towards the end. Well, that's actually a pretty good sunflower. Now, let's see here. Probably needs actual seeds in the middle there. Right now it just kind of looks like a black hole. So let's see here. Can take this, go back to mix again, make the radius 10 again. Just add a bunch of dots in there. Dot, 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 dot. And I got a nice sunflower going on here. And this is our picture. Excellent. Yes. A few more dots, maybe. Yeah, good enough. Okay, so we got this picture here. So, as you can see, as we edit it on one side, we see it on the other side. We can even switch back to layout mode, and again, making sure that if we are in material preview, so press Z and select material preview, which is on the bottom here. Because otherwise, if we're in solid mode or in wireframe mode, you're not going to see it. So select material preview, and you'll see how your picture actually looks. Now, of course, my texture is getting stretched out because the picture itself was is a square, while the texture of the picture is a square, while the object that I'm putting it onto is a rectangle. So it stretches it out. So, of course, I could get it to fit back in appropriately by pressing S to scale it, and then X to just bring it in on the Y-axis a little bit. And that'll be more appropriate towards that. Now, let's say we want to actually make this into a picture with a frame. Let's switch it into edit mode. And we will extrude, or maybe this might be a good opportunity to use bevel. Bevel's not going to work in this case. Let's use inset. There we go. That's the effect I was looking for. Inset. Actually, you know what? Never mind. Let's go back, press E to extrude. Okay, so it's extruded a little bit. We've got a little bit of depth. Now we're going to make sure that we grab the front face here, I to inset a little bit. And since this is going to be the frame of our object, we're just going to grab it and pull it in just a bit. Actually, let's look at it on the side here. Shift it into wireframe mode. Grab it, pull it in. That way I can see how far it's going in. Lock it into the Y-axis here. There we are. So it goes in nice and smoothly. Click. Okay, so now it's actually embedded correctly. Press Shift-Z back into the previous mode that we're in, which was the material preview. Okay, so now this looks like a bit of a frame, but of course my texture is still going over the entire thing. So let's go back to our texture mode over here on the right-hand side. Take a look at our material. The material, of course, is still called flag. We're going to call this flower. There we go. And we're going to add a new material slot by clicking on the plus. And then the material that we're going to pick is going to be wood 2, which I believe was just the dark brown color we were using for the chairs. All right, so now that we got wood 2 and flower, let's select the inside one here and click assign. Then I'm going to press Control I to select the inverse of everything, which means everything except for the center here. I'm going to click on the wood and click assign. Now you see that the entire wood surrounding everything is actually using the wood texture. And the flower, if I double tap A and I click select, the flower is now the middle one. Now the only problem is, of course, is that our UV is still a little bit thrown off here because it was trying to actually set up the picture to appear across the entire object, but now we're actually only just using the single face right here. Let's go to our UV editing. We can actually see how this got screwed up a little bit because the islands of our UV frame are not filling up the whole thing. So probably the best way to fix that actually would be just over here in edit mode, making sure that we're in face select mode. Just select the face there, click U to unwrap it. Oh, except now I put it on its side. Never works quite the way you want it to. All right, so it put it on its side. Let's go back over here to the left-hand side, select the whole edge, and rotate it around 90 degrees. So I'm just going to type in 90. There we go. And now it's filling up the whole picture properly, just the way I made it. And they seem to actually fit nicely. All right, let's go back to layout here. Take a look around, press tab to go into object mode. And here's our picture. A lovely picture it is with our own custom material around it. So we are about a little bit past the halfway point. So let me just bring up the big screen again and have a look-see here. Is there any questions? No questions. All right. Good. I hope everyone's able to follow along okay. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to go on and ask me the questions. I will check them again before we're all finished here. Just checking to see if there's any other messages. No. All right. So I'm going to go back here again and bring up the big screen again. Okay, so we can do this same thing over here with our person. So let's say, for example, I want to use something other than just skin, shirt, and hair, for example, but maybe I want to have the head a little more customized with my own. And we're going to actually paint this directly onto the head. So instead of the skin, it's actually just going to be called head from now on. So for now, let's double tap A to deselect everything. We're going to select the hair. We're going to switch up to skin. Now we're going to click assign, which means now these vertices are actually all part of skin now. So double tap A. If I go down to hair again and I select, it's selecting nothing. So hair is not selected anymore. I can't actually remove hair now, but that doesn't matter. So now we have skin up here, which is now set to the base color to be slightly pinkish. Well, let's say instead we actually wanted to paint the whole head with some new color. So first things first, let's make sure that our head is properly unwrapped. So let's zoom in over here, make sure that the head is selected. Switch it into wireframe mode, look at it from the side here. I'm going to select the whole top of the head here. All right, so right now looking over here on this side, all my islands are kind of screwed up right now because they were based off of the whole body before. So we're just going to click U to unwrap it. I don't like that unwrapping, so I'm going to use the Smart Unwrap. There we go, nice, clean squares. That's what I want to see. All right, then let's go over to Texture Paint here. We're going to switch this side over into object mode briefly, just so I can zoom in on the person. Press tab to go into edit mode so I can get right zoomed in on the head here. And now what we want to do is we want to create a new picture again. So a different way of doing it than what we did before is I created a new picture over on this side before. I could also go and do it over here with my materials. So making sure that I'm on skin. And it says the base color is the kind of pinkish color. Instead, I can click on the dot here, open it up, look down for image texture. So right now it needs to actually have an image. We're going to click on new. It's going to want to know the same information again. This time we'll call this one head. 1024 by 1024, good enough. The color can be slightly pinkish like my own skin tone. Just to start with, click OK. You're going to see that it automatically makes it that color again. And then to load it over on this side for painting purposes, we just drop down this menu, and there it is again. Now, by looking over at the viewport here, dropping down this menu to Texture Paint, we can actually start painting it as we did before, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint it directly onto the head here. So as I start painting it on this side, you'll see it actually appears over on the other side at the same time. But the advantage of me doing it like this, though, is that way I can actually start making sure that I am painting it along the actual seams. So that way it looks correct, like if I'm actually painting on hair here. So let's make the radius a lot more higher. And we are going to want to just make sure that we have it on mix mode, but our strength is too low, so we're going to crank that up a bit. Radius is too big. I just want it to be 50. Here we are. There we go. And now I can actually just paint around the edge here and make it a little bit more realistic like actual hair. As you see, as I fill it in, it fills in on the other side as well. Same thing across the back here. We'll just keep on filling this in. Making sure, of course, the strength is all the way up at 100%. That way it actually fills it in mostly as dark. Add another hairline here again. And a little bit of hair in front, some bangs or something. I, of course, am completely bald, so there's not really much to show. But we'll just pretend this is back in a day when I had more hair myself. Okay, and then we can zoom right in on the face here. Grab onto this, pull it over a bit. Change the radius back down to 10. Give him a nice little smiley face. Oh, it didn't like how I did the undo there. Okay. Luckily, it's still letting me paint. Okay. There we go. Then you can see, of course, it's editing the texture over on this side at the same time. But instead, I'm actually doing it on the 3D side, and this allows me to get a little bit more control on how it appears in the 3D space. There you go. Give him a little nose. Even maybe give him some ears. And an ear on the other side. Good enough. And now we've actually painted a cool looking face on top of it. So as you can imagine, there's all sorts of cool possibilities for painting and decorating all your own objects. Feel free to explore a lot of the different coloring settings that they have up here. But for now, I want to make sure we have enough time to get into a little bit of our animation. Here we are. So, all right, we've got our guy there. He's got his little smiley face. Switching it back to layout mode. See that he has our picture facing it again. Cool. All right, so let's see if we can actually start animating it and adding all the different armatures and the like that would actually allow us to deform how our guy looks, so that way his arms are more down on the side and he can actually walk. So let me just quickly double check to make sure I don't have any questions. No questions. Awesome. So looking back here at the layout mode again. So first things first is that right now my guy is standing a little bit off center and the cursor is down here at the bottom. So to make sure that the cursor is in the correct place, here we are. I keep forgetting which button to press. And actually, it looks like my screencast keys are missing again. I don't know why they keep missing. Too bad. I'm just going to have to announce out loud the buttons I'm pressing as I'm working on them then. So, pressing the period on the number pad, I can zoom back in on my person here. And I want to make sure that the cursor is moved back towards the center of my person here. Because if I add in a new object, it's going to be appearing over there, and I don't want it there. This is going to be the armature, which is going to allow us to change how our guy appears. So to make sure that the armature is actually inside of him, we need to make sure that it actually is right here in the center point of my object, where the actual arrows are originating from, and this little orange dot appears. So to do that, we press Shift-S. And you're going to see that there's a whole bunch of ways to actually put the selection to the cursor or push the cursor to the selection. So I could say, move the selection to the cursor, and it's going to move it back to the origin point, or I can press Shift-S and say, move the cursor to selected. So now you see that the cursor is actually inside my person now, and anytime I add a new object, for example, a UV sphere, it's going to appear right in the middle of my guy. Of course, I don't want that to happen. So instead, what I'm going to be doing now is adding in an armature. So dropping down the Add menu here, I'm going to go all the way down past all of my meshes and metaballs and text and the like. I'm going to select Armature right down here. Now the armature is actually inside my guy. You can kind of see the top of it right there. But it's kind of hard to see. So in order for us to actually see it at all times, even though we're actually working on our guy, is go over here to the Details section, making sure that you're on your World Properties, and in the Viewport Display menu on the side right here, no, not the Viewport Display, actually blank. I need to actually edit my object. Yes, I was in the wrong one. I need to be on Object Properties, not World Properties. So Object Properties is this little orange square along the side right here. It's just below World Properties. And what I want is Viewport Display over here. So what I'm telling it to do is to put it in front. So no matter where I'm looking at the camera, the armature is always appearing in front here. You can see that it's actually kind of covering up my guy. That's fine though, because the armature, of course, is generally speaking invisible anyways. This is actually just going to be inside our guy. But now we can see it at all times by placing it in front. So that's under Viewport Display right over here on the side in the Object Properties menu. All right, now that we have our armature here, we're in Object Mode, and you can, of course, grab your armature and move it around just like any other object. Control Z, of course, I want to make sure it is still inside my person. So, first things first. Let's put it into front orthographic mode and make sure that the root of my armature is down by the navel thereabouts. So this is the very first bone of my armature. Every single part of an armature is often referred to as a bone. You'll see why in a moment, of course, because as we start extending the armature, it's going to start looking like a skeleton. So the root part of the armature is the very first one. So now I have that down by the navel, down by the belt. Press Tab to switch into edit mode. And again, make sure at this point that you're actually in front orthographic view. The reason is that we don't want our armature to be going backwards and forwards at all. We want it to be just totally straight up and down at all times. So by having it in front orthographic view, I'm not going to mistakenly push it backwards at all. So now I can grab on to the top ball of my root here by pressing the G key. You'll see that I can go around. So this is going to become our spine at this point. Press Z to lock it in on the Z axis. And this is going to go right up to the shoulders at this point. Now, just as with our meshes, we can extrude armatures by pressing the E key. So we press E to extrude. This is now our shoulder. We're going to extend it out to the left shoulder. Press E again to extrude it to the elbow. And E to extrude it again to the hand. Going back to the root armature again, I can press P to extrude it up into the neck. Press Z to make sure it's locked along the center again, and we want it to be nice and center in the middle of the neck. Right up to the base of the head, then press E again. And this particular bone, of course, we could even name it as the skull. So each one of these bones were going to be associated with the different parts of the body eventually. So that way we can actually start animating it. Down to the root, I'm going to click the bottom ball on the armature of the root. Press E to extrude that out. That'll be the right hip. E to extrude it again. Pressing Z to make sure it goes nice and straight down. And Z again, straight down. Now we've got the spine, the shoulders, head, neck, elbows, hands. Now, of course, I've actually looked at the armatures of professionally made animations, for example, even the armatures, and you can actually look this up on YouTube. You can see the armatures that are used by Disney for a lot of their animations, and you'll see that they're going to break a lot of their armatures down to the very smallest detail. So, for example, in the case of Anna, for example, from the movie Frozen, there's going to be armatures for her dress to make sure that her dress can be properly programmed by the computer to flow as she goes running along. There'll be armatures for every single finger. So they often will add a ton of armatures. But for our purposes, we're just playing a game with a little blockhead here. We don't need to have a ton of armatures here. Just enough to bend it around a little bit to make him look like he's walking. Okay, so now we're going to press A to select the entire armature. And in the armature menu here, we're going to go down here to where it says names. And we're going to select auto name left and right. Actually, before I do that, let me get rid of my picture here. All right. So looking over here at the scene selection, and by opening up the armature on this side, by clicking on the little arrows here, you're going to see that it opens up and shows the relationship of all the different bones that we have. So you're going to see that each bone is underneath a previous bone, which basically just means that it is a child element of that bone. It's actually attached to that bone, and it belongs to it. So, of course, the main bone right here is the spine bone. And then each time we keep on going down, you see that they're all related to the previous bone behind it. So going back to the viewport here and pressing A to select all, when I drop down the armature menu and select names and say auto name left right, you're going to see that it automatically sees that I have gone off and I've placed a lot of these bones off to the right side of my object. And so it's put a little R next to all of them, showing that they are all right bones now. And this is why it was important that I made sure when I was going straight up and down, I pressed the Z button to make sure it was completely in the center. That way it was able to recognize that my spine bone is not a right bone. It is just a center bone, if you will. Same thing with the head bone here. It doesn't have an R next to it. But it does recognize the elbow and the hand bones as right bones. Okay, so now that I have all these recognized by Blender as right bones, I can drop down the armature menu one more time. And I can click on the Symmetrize button. So Symmetrize means that it will take all of the right side of everything and copy it and move it over onto the left side. Pretty handy. So now I've got a left and a right side. They are symmetrical because I use the auto name left and right. So this, of course, is why it's important to make sure that your person is facing forward. So when you use the 1 button on your number pad and you're looking at the orthographic front view, that way it can automatically recognize left and right. So now I've got an armature that totally fills in the whole body, and it is connected to the head. Now the only thing we need to do now then is to make my armature part of the person. Because right now the person is a separate part, a separate object from my armature. Now, of course, your first thought might be, well, let's join the two. Well, I can't actually join the two because they are not both meshes. One is a mesh, the other one is an armature. So instead, I actually want to make my person a child element of my armature. So to do that, I'm going to select the person, then press Control and select the armature. Oh wait, I'm in edit mode. Oof, yes, don't do this in edit mode. Make sure you go into object mode. So press the tab to go into object mode. Let's try this again. Click the person, click the armature, and press Control P. So of course, the same thing as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, because armature comes next, armature is the primary selection right now, because it's the most recent one that I selected, so it's in gold. The person is in reddish color here, meaning it's the secondary one, which means when I press Control P now, it means that the armature is going to become the parent of everything else. So I press Control P and say set the parent to, and you're going to see here, if you did it correctly and you actually have the armature as the primary selection, it's going to say armature deform. And what we want to do, though, is to have automatic weights, meaning that it is going to automatically try and make an assumption based off of the size of the mesh, how much the mesh is going to bend when the armature bends. We can actually be a lot more specific, and I'm sure, of course, the folks over at Disney go off and they get very specific about how a particular part of the mesh is going to be bending at a particular time when you start moving your armature. But in our case, we're just going to use the automatic weights. Good enough for our little blockhead guy. So by clicking on that now, you're going to see that the person has disappeared and has become part of the armature. By me opening up the armature over here in our scene collection, you're going to see person is listed down here as a subpart of the armature. So the armature still has all of its bones and everything, and the person is listed underneath. Now we actually can use one of the cool new functions that are in our modes over here. There is the object mode, the edit mode, and then there's the pose mode. So of course, if I am just clicking on some random mesh around here, like my cylinders, and I drop this down, you're going to see texture, paint, and so on. But if I click on an armature, and I drop down my modes over here on the left side, you'll see that pose mode is one of the options now. So now that I'm in pose mode, I can actually then grab onto one of my armatures, press G to grab, and you'll see that as the armature bends, it pulls along the mesh along with it. Pretty cool, huh? Right, so now I got to bring my face back up so you can see my smile, because this is the part that I love about animation. Now, of course, this is like playing with a doll or something. You can grab onto or an action figure if you're not into dolls, of course. You can grab onto the shoulder, pull the arms down, grab onto the other shoulder, pull the arms down. And now you can start seeing the possibilities for our animation. We can pull the legs back. Remember how I mentioned before that we had to make sure that the legs were not connected when we extruded them? Well, this is why. Because now we can grab onto a leg, pull it forward, grab a foot, pull that back a little bit. You'll see that it actually animates the legs, so we can actually have our dude walk along. Whee! And even have them bend over or something. Now, of course, keep in mind, the bottom part of our root here is not actually connected. It's usually only going to be connecting to the top part. You're going to see that if I grab it instead of rotating it, it's just going to get pulled up, and then we got some kind of weird bouncy thing going on here. Of course, as I've mentioned before, there's that silly egg dog cartoon where the little egg dogs are just bouncing up and down all the time. So we could maybe animate something silly where he's bouncing up and down all the time. But no, this isn't that kind of a video. We could always make an egg dog video some other day. So, okay, today we had got to cover how to add some new meshes. We covered about how to, not meshes, I'm sorry, add new materials, how to paint our own new materials, and we covered the very basics of creating a posable 3D object using armatures. So now that we can actually pose our person, next week we'll actually start animating our person, which of course is what this whole class is all about. So I hope you guys had fun. Feel free, of course, to keep on sending questions onto the Tinkering Create Facebook page. Again, my name is Doug Tepe. I'm the lead instructor with Tinkering Create. I hope you guys had fun this week. Next week, animation. Hope to see you there.